Should we move the interpreters?
No.
Should have done my makeup better.
So should I.
If it's, whenever it's in this room or the CMS auditorium, it'll probably be YouTube. Or BTC.
Don't worry about blocking me, please. Block me. Might have to tell them to mute. Where's the phone?
Okay, you have to tell them that when you make your introductions.
Huh?
You have to tell them when you make your introductions.
Okay.
It's already a mess anyway.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending the African American Interview Techniques workshop Interview Techniques. My name is Dr. Taiwo. I'm with the Office of Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights, and also would like to thank the Human Capital CMS Leadership Institute for collaborating with us on allowing this workshop to happen. Also, I'd like to let the regents know to please mute your phones over there, and after the presentation, we'll have a session for questions and answers. So at that time, you can actually unmute to ask questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker here, James Cagle. So James is an organizational development specialist here at CMS. His title is Improvement Consultant, CMS EVS Action Planner. He has been with the agency for 5.5 years. Prior to CMS, James served as a director in Delaware Department of Labor. He served in an appointed official capacity until retirement in 2012. James is also a retired military officer, having served 21 years in the United States Air Force. He's an exceptional leader, experienced leader, hiring manager, executive coach, mentor, and facilitator. So I'd like to introduce and welcome James to start the workshop. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you, Goki. And on behalf of the African American Heritage Month, thank you for placing this offer to me to go over interviewing techniques for those interested in looking for and improving their hiring prospects, okay? So we'll go ahead and begin. First thing I want to do is just make certain that people can hear me in the regions. Am I coming through clear?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to start off with the objectives, and in case we have people who have signed on to the telephones and don't have a visual, I'll go ahead and read the objectives. By the conclusion of the OEOCR Lunch and Learn, you will be able to prepare for the interview, understand how to conduct yourself during the interview, and then how to follow up afterwards. We will also provide an opportunity for a question and answer period toward the end. Now, I also am one to be an interactive person, so don't feel as if you're put out if I ask you a question and you're at the table, as we have more people coming in, so thank you for being here. Before I read the outline, I want to just say, many of us are preparing for or should be preparing for an interview or the next job well in advance of any posting. And I'll say it's also normal behavior to seek better employment. So as outlined, we will discuss the preparation for interviewing, dressed in appearance for interviews, composure that you should have during the course of an interview, and of course, your follow-ups. So preparation, one of the key things that you should always do is your research, your homework, I would say. I find that when people do present themselves, sometimes people are not as prepared as you would hope that they would be. So if you have an opportunity to go in and look or review a functional statement for what the role is or the job requirement will be once you get in the job, I would advise that you do that. In addition to participating in trainings that are offered in those agencies or components that you're interested in being in. Would you mute your phones, please? Would you mute your phones, please? Thank you. Okay. What prior knowledge you have about the area would be helpful. So if you have the organizational chart available to you, I would encourage you to take a look at that and the other organizations that are aligned close to that. So it gives you some kind of a context in terms of the purpose of that particular agency that you hope to interview for. Again, the functional statement can be found on the CMS net. And I'd advise you to go out and take a look at functional statements just so you know what they look like, and do that pretty close to the end of this session so that you don't lose that context. Some components advertise internal trainings. So you can sit in on some of those internal trainings and it will help you to understand more about what that particular component does. And remember I talked about how many of you should be preparing for movement even prior to a posting coming out. That's what I'm mentioning here. Okay. So also when you're researching, you should be planning to do informational interviews. If you can get into the opportunity to see an organization or a culture of a unit, the informational interviews are always a good way of being able to do that. What you're doing when you seek an interview, informational interview, is you're reaching out to the director and asking if there's an opportunity that you could come over and do an interview and just learn a little bit more about their respective areas. Many of them are open to that opportunity for you. So I would encourage you to do that. If you have a mentor, you should also reach out to your mentors. Mentors are valuable because a mentor will normally be a person who's been with the agency for a period of time and can share with you some context about what goes on in those different components. And of course, they may even know or have contacts within those components that you're interested in. So just for a visual, I have an example of what a functional statement looks like. And again, you can find this on the CMS web or CMS net, and you just open them up and they have functional statements for every area that you could possibly think about working in within CMS. So let's get, I'm sorry. Yes, please mute your phones. We can hear a lot of traffic on the coming back feedback, so please mute your telephone. Okay, so preparation. Fit analysis. I want to spend a little time on fit analysis. I'm also a person who does the NEO, and in NEO, what we talk about is how people actually got hired here at CMS. And what I go through is a process of letting people know that, hey, you had an energy that that hiring manager saw, and they decided to hire you based upon how they felt that you would fit within the group of people that you would be working with. So I made sure that I addressed what fit would be here as well. So fit analysis, know yourself. It's important to know who you are and how you feel that you might fit within a group. I want you to think about how you can be aware of the qualities that you offer a potential group. And again, that helps if you are a person, I know that's distracting. Please mute your telephones. Please mute your telephones. Thank you. So be aware of the qualities that you offer to a potential group. What I would suggest that you do is write down qualities that you perceive that you have. But if you know something about the group that you're going into, are they analysts? Are they policy people? That helps you to kind of understand whether or not it's a group that may be a talkative group. It's a group that may be not so talkative. They may be individuals who like to work more so independent or individual. That helps to know what that is or what it looks like so that you can figure out whether or not you fit into that environment. And of course, during the process of the interview, that interview manager is making that assessment based upon what they perceive that you've done and how you share your information. So again, fit is real important in the preparation of your interview process. Matching your skills against the requirements. And one of the things that I see, I'm sorry, is there someone eating potato chips in the background? Please, this is a video conference, and we're picking up all of that information, all that traffic on the video. So please mute your telephones. So match skills against requirements, okay? There's an opportunity for you to look at skills, knowledge, and abilities on every application that you have. Oftentimes, people miss the opportunity to kind of look at those skills and to kind of pair what your skills look like against those. Because it's important that you talk about those things during the interview process in terms of how you match against that. How can you develop the gaps in the skills that you don't see that you have? Oh, thank you. And of course, one of the main things is that what are the strengths that you have that you can communicate during the interview process that you know are weaknesses, but they are the strengths, well, I'm sorry, you see that you have weaknesses, but you know that they are strengths that you have that can counterbalance that. That's how you can become more successful with an interview process in the preparatory phase. So you also want to just search your job history. I have a lot of conversations with employees about, well, what's usable information? Okay, usable information is obviously what you do, all of your past job related histories, your volunteer stuff, and of course your details. All of that's very helpful because it helps you to embrace a process. And many times an employer will look at or ask you a question about something that you may not have had direct experience with. But if you can speak to the process, many of us will take a risk on hiring you because you understand the process and we can teach you the rest. That we have an example of what the duties looks like. I wanted to make sure that you saw that in case you haven't. Now let's talk about dress and appearance. This is challenging in some instances there. And I'm going to spend a little time on this one because I see things that I'm thinking that I shouldn't see. And of course, I get people who always ask me for feedback about these types of things. And I'm not sure that it goes out as wide as it should. So you've heard the saying, dress for success or the success that you want. Okay. Well, our first bullet is the business success that you want. What does that look like for you? Okay. I know I'm posing a question, but I kind of want you to think about that for a moment. What does it look like for you? And I want you to know that your physical presentation is always under observation, even when you're not job hunting. Even when you're not job hunting. So you have to be mindful of that at all times. Because if you're applying for a role here at CMS, there are people who've been watching you well before the time that you've decided that you wanted to go for an interview with them. So they saw you when your hair was orange. They saw you when, you were wearing the pants, I'm talking about the males, real high or whatever. They saw all the crazy modes, okay? And now they see you dressed up. Now they know what they're going to see later if they hire you, because they watched enough of the routine before. So what I'm trying to advocate to people is that what you do is come in as if you're going to work every day. Okay? You don't have to be real tight every day, but you should look presentable every day in what is suitable attire, professional attire for work. I can't say that any clearer than that, because that is the downfall for a lot of people. If you observe the work culture, it's not hard to figure out what that attire is, because we have enough people in this building that you can see what's acceptable attire. So that's why I always encourage people to do is when you go into any organization, pay attention to the culture, pay attention to the work culture so you can pick it up and decide what track you want to be on. Now, I can look like I want to look, but I should not expect much out of that if that look is not the acceptable look within the culture that I work in. So that's what we have to think about. Grooming standards. We know what they are. I'm not going to get into the list of talking about what they can be. Again, watch the culture around you and figure out what the grooming standard looks for those who you see who have movement versus those who you see who do not. Values of the organization. Are you fitting in? That's what this all sums up to be, is are you fitting into the culture of the organization? So what I say to that is this. We are in this month and we're talking about diversity, okay, and the beauty of diversity. So what diversity is we come from all diverse backgrounds. We come from different geographic locations, and they shape our belief systems. But we all come here to this building, or a building like this, and we spend 8 hours a day in this facility. And the same success that we have in other areas, we'd have the same success if we were to embrace the culture that we have here. And that's what we have to kind of focus on is what do we do different when we walk into the walls of CMS or any other federal institution that we may be in where we seek the opportunity for promotion. So let's transition to composure. The interview process can be challenging for many, because a lot of people are not comfortable talking about themselves in a way that an interviewer needs to hear you talk about yourself. It's normally we're talking about something else, but never detailing how well we do something. And that's what you have to work around. That's what you have to work on when you're preparing yourself for an interview. So there are two types of things that you have to be able to do. Just your general conversation and your conversation about you. So how do you best outline who you are? And you have to take time to do that. You have to take the time to write down these qualities like I mentioned earlier in the presentation so you can see that. I've sat in interviews and I've interviewed people who I realized perhaps didn't even read their own resume. Don't know if someone else put the resume together for them. I read it, memorized the resume, and I'm watching the person and I'll ask them a question that I know is on their resume, easy, could be on the second sheet, And I looked at them going through the resume looking for what I just asked them, and I'm like, well, if I'm prepared, why weren't you? Okay, so you should know what's on your resume. You should be able to speak to the qualities that you have on your resume that complement the job. But you can't do that unless you really prepare for it. So you want to be able to be composed when you're doing this. So I kind of listed a couple of things that I felt were pertinent for this. So let me talk about being poised. Being poised is nothing more than being ready to move on the topic. Being able to be engaging and being able to speak to that piece, but people realizing that you're comfortable with it. Okay? And that takes practice doing that. And what I find is that sometimes the practice is taking on interviews, even if you don't get the job. Taking on interviews to be able to practice being or delivering under pressure. Okay, because that's where people crumble at, is that I can say that I have it, but when it's time to deliver it under the pressure of an interview, I lose that. Enthusiasm. Okay, as I mentioned at the NEO presentations, that thing that you have, that energy that you bring to the table, that thing that allowed that hiring manager to hire you as opposed to the other 13 people on that list, that was that level of enthusiasm that you had. Okay? That same enthusiasm when you're starting to look for employment or better employment internal to CMS, you still have to bring that to the game. Even if the people know who you are. So I'll pause here because I want to make sure that, we have people who are here because we want to understand better interviewing techniques so that I can become better employed here at CMS or perhaps wherever I might go. So what happens is I see that we have people who are in CMS, and because I'm already here, I don't feel that I have to do the same kinds of things that I did when I initially applied for the job. Because you know me. You know what kind of work I do. So for some reason or another, we don't come into the room with the same energy that we came into the organization with. And that's where we hurt ourselves. So, this is game day when you're going in for an interview. You have to muster all of those things up that you had when you walked in the door, and you have to bring that to the table. Because that's where your 12, your 13s, and your 14s are going to come in. Because I still need to see that. Okay? I know who you are, that's helpful, but I need to see that there's an energy around. I need to see that when you move to the next level, that you're going to go into character for that level. Okay? Eye contact. How often is it that we get to a table and we have 4 or 5 people there at the table? Well, 3 to 5 people at the table, which normally is an odd number. And you lock into the eye that you feel that you're most comfortable with. So whenever you start answering a question, you lock into this eye, because I want to speak to this person because I like everything about their countenance. I'm missing the other people. You know what your grade looks like because of that? So what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to give people equal time with eye contact. That takes work. That takes the ability of developing your interview skills to be able to stay in the moment, where you can describe whatever the process is while you are engaging the individuals at the table. Okay? That's a skill. Some people do it well, some people have to develop into it. So eye contact is extremely important. I can't begin to tell you how many people I've heard after the interview process discuss the fact that, You know, I don't know if I can trust a person. Why? They can never make or maintain eye contact with me. And the interesting thing is that's how a lot of people determine whether or not they can trust you, by what they see in your eyes. Okay? Ready. Are you ready for the interview? Did you get enough sleep the night before? Did you drink too much coffee prior to the interview? So am I just, okay? You know, I mean, you can see it in them, okay? You gotta kind of take it easy that day. You have to be ready, okay? You have to be studied. You have to know thyself. You have to come in there ready to talk about yourself in a manner that you don't normally do. In that manner that you normally say, man, that person's pretty arrogant, aren't they? Listen to them. They're just blowing themselves up. Well, that's what you have to do on that day of the interview if you want the job. If you want the job. Clarity. When you're at the interview, you don't have to ever be rushed. So what I always share with people is set your timing for the pace of your speech. Set it in such a way that you don't feel as though you're rushed. And on the tough questions, it's not like it's tough because you've been speaking at this pace all the while. So they feel as though, okay, they were never rattled, even if you were. Remember that old saying, never let them see you sweat? That's what I'm talking about. But if you start off answering questions, pop, 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 and then you kind of slow down because, well, you know, now people are beginning to read into what it is that you're challenged by. And where you can help yourself, you don't want people to be able to read that. So it's being clear. It's not using slang. It's not using acronyms. Even if you're in the environment, even if it's in your environment, don't use acronyms. Plain speech. Be as natural as you can so people can assess who you are. Okay? Let's see, let me make sure I covered everything on my notes. Okay, so again, know yourself and study your resume. Okay? The other thing I want to mention too here again is body language. Okay? So I'm preparing for an interview. I don't interview all the time. So I'm not quite sure how well I'm going to do. So do I reach out to a person, perhaps a mentor or a trusted friend, to say, hey, let me go over some things with you? Or perhaps someone in your community that you trust, but you know that you would present yourself in front of that person as professional as you could, but you'd be intimidated by them, so it gives you the same feeling that you'd have in the interview session. And if you did that, would you record yourself so you can see how you respond? Because you know, at interview sessions, I see some of this. I see a whole lot of things here, like crossing of the legs. I see you locking us out. Closed body language. I see you looking away. I see a lot of signals that a person sends your way when they're uncomfortable with the process that I know that they could have eliminated had they had an opportunity to view themselves when they were answering questions. So it can be something as simple as, I want to know, you know, I've had people say, man, you always look like you're angry. You always look like you're carrying a scowl on your face. Okay, well, speak to yourself in the mirror and then look at your expression after you've spoken to yourself. Okay, see whether or not you see what other people see. See what it takes to maintain a pleasant look on your face, you know, while you're doing that. But you have to look at that. Now, these days, you have a nice little handy tool. We do this enough. But what we can do is run that camera and allow us to see what we look like under pressure. because that's what you're dealing with when you're trying to improve your job opportunities through interviewing. Okay, but body language is a very big key in the interview process, and you should know what you're doing during that time. So again, once again, a mentor can help in this. So if you have a mentor, and that's the second time I mentioned that, that's a powerful person to have in your corner. Now, in addition to everything that we're talking about presentation skills. How do we present ourselves? We have another tool here at CMS that helps us to do that better, and it's called Toastmasters. So Toastmasters really helps you to compose yourself during short notice speeches or presentations, delivery style, get you comfortable with yourself, teaches you how to get rid of butterflies and all of that. I would strongly suggest that if you feel uncomfortable speaking before people, or if you've gone into 4 or 5 job interviews and can't figure out why I can't clinch one of these, maybe it's your delivery. Maybe you have to work on those delivery skills better. So you have to find a way of developing that so that you can win. Okay. So, follow-up. Follow-up is important, okay? Because sometimes, I don't think you'll see it much here at CMS, but after the follow-up, sometimes people will ask about references. Well, if we're doing an internal interview, oftentimes your reference is already there because you listed them as your supervisor on your application. So they know who they're gonna call and check on. But in the case that they do ask for that, I would always recommend that follow-up not take more than a day from the time that you've interviewed. Okay, thank you emails. They're always nice to send. They should always be short. I recommend them. But what I don't recommend is that you question how you did in the interview process. Okay? Because what happens is, again, the employer is looking for the person with the best fit. And you were qualified, but you may not have been the fit at that particular time. Okay? For a variety of different reasons. Okay? And I stated some of those things at the beginning where I talked about, how do you fit in a group? Are you an energized person? Does it seem like, if I put you in this group with a bunch of introverts, would you work well with them? Or would they say, hey, that's too much energy for me, okay? Or are you an introvert going into a body of extroverts, and is that too much pressure for you? Okay, so that leader is constantly thinking about the dynamics of their group. And then once they get that down, then they can decide, well, I think this person will fit. But that comes from, again, observation. So many times when you are looking at a job and you think no one else is considering you for anything, there's someone who's watching you. They watch who you communicate with. They listen to how you communicate because they know at some time or another, you may be a person competing for a position somewhere with them. They may not even be in position at this time. But at a time later, they may be in a position and you're looking for something. Well, how are your interactions with them before you know them to be in a leadership position? That's why dealing with your culture in a positive way is always the best action that you can take. That's why you're on an interview every day, even before you consider interviewing for a job. There's always someone watching. So what I encourage you to do is I encourage you to dress well, dress as if you're going to work every day. I mean, I was in a uniform one day, for about 21 years worth. But one thing I did is in that uniform, I wore that uniform as best as it could be worn. So you could see the difference between who wore the uniform a certain way, okay? And then when that changed, I wore my other, what we call these rainbow clothing. I wore those as best I could wear them as well. because that was my next opportunity, okay, for what someone else was going to see. And what happens is you'll find that people may even approach you and ask you if you're interested in movement because of the way that they see you handling yourselves. So that's what I wanted to be able to say in regard to the interview process. I'm going to open it up for questions now. So I'm going to go back to the outline so you can see the items that we have there on the outline. So we talked about preparation at first, okay? And we are on preparation now. And I'm going to go to that slide there. So are there any questions about preparation? Was there anything misunderstood when I talked about doing your homework on yourself? I'm going to open it up. I'm going to ask people in the room first, then I'm going to go to you all in the regions and those of you who may be on the phone. Okay, so in the room, are there any questions about the preparation phase here? Yes, ma'am.
Is it important to prepare information about like the organization that you go into, to learn about them, what they do, and what is their job, and who is in charge? Is that important in your interview?
It is important to know what that is and how to go about getting that. Again, when I talked about having a mentor or even just having access to know a little bit more about that organization before you walk in the door, always best to be able to do that. And your org charts will be able to outline who they are. And of course, you know, we have a lunchroom. You know, people sit at tables and sometimes people are doing intelligence gathering at those tables, okay? So they're sitting with people who they know to work in those other areas and they're fishing for information. That happens. Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions in the room? How about in the regions? Any questions about the preparation stage?
Any questions from the regions?
How about anyone on the phone?
I have a, hello.
Sure.
Hello, I have a question on the follow-up.
Yeah, can you
Thanks,
please
okay.
identify your name and the company you're with, please? Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can. Mm-hmm.
Hello? Okay,
Hello,
hi,
we can
Doris
hear you.
Rawson, CMS Region 5, Doris Ross. And I had a question on the follow-up. You said that the follow-up should be no more than a day after the interview. I was just trying to wonder, what is the reasoning for that?
No, I didn't say the follow-up. The follow-up in terms of if you were to have to offer recommendations or your, let me go specifically to that so I can. References. That was the day.
References.
Yes. That was the day item that I mentioned there. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So, let's just say if you are finished with the interview and you do want to follow up, is it too soon to follow up? Would you wait a day or two, or is there any length of time that you would want to wait to follow up with the person that you interviewed with to see if there had been a decision or anything?
Yes, it's not a hard and fast item there. You know, in my interview processing, what I've done from the person who was the interviewee, I have probably asked how long were the interviews to be conducted, and at the conclusion of the interviews, I probably sent my information in then, and I was doing that for a strategic purpose, okay, because it was toward the end. And I wanted to be a reminder of who I was, okay, as opposed to sending it immediately after I left. And then you having 3 or 4 more interviews going on at that time. And that's why I mentioned that it's nice to send something short, but to send something, but strategically you can place that at the end so that when they are making their decisions, perhaps your name comes back to light in terms of how your interview went, and if it's favorable, that helped to reinforce it. See, this is not
Okay,
a,
I think I see
what I was going to
that.
say is that
Yeah.
this is not an exact science. So one of the things that I do is I kind of put out things that were kind of normally like best practices, what I've watched people do and what I saw that was effective and the kinds of things that worked on me. When I received letters at the end of an interview process, I thought it was appropriate to receive them then. It kind of reminded me of the person and perhaps what they did. I was able to see something in terms of a writing style at that time, where perhaps I didn't ask for a writing sample. Okay, so those are things that kind of factored into that. But again, it kind of helped me to, let me think about that person for a minute. Okay. I thought it was a nice touch. I thought it was a nice professional closure. And this is the other thing that I thought about. Even if I couldn't use the person in this particular job, the fact that they took the time to do that, I thought about other opportunities that they may have fit better in. That helpful?
Oh, yes, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Yes.
you. I have a question in the room?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Karen Five, and I'm from CM. And to follow up to the young lady's question, you said to respond towards the end of the interview process. So how would you know that during the interview? Is it appropriate to ask a question
Yes.
about, when will you do your
Yes,
interviews?
absolutely. Yes. Before I leave the room, I normally ask, I said, well, do you have an idea in terms of when you will be completing your interview process? So they normally say, yep, we plan on finishing up with the last interview on Thursday. Okay, great, thank you. So Friday, I'm getting ready to hit the send button. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Barbara Nelson, CMCS.
Yes.
So you're being contacted for an interview,
Yes.
and you have an option of times, say
Mhm.
like Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yes.
I hear some people saying it's best to go in first, and then I've heard some people saying it's best to go in last, take the last interview. Any thoughts on that?
Now, I can understand where the person talks about going in first because they want to set the bar real high. But, what happens is during the course of the week, some of us in leadership positions, we have all these other things that happen. And, we're human, so sometimes we may remember the last person, especially if they were knocking the ball out of the park. And we were taking notes on everyone. But remember, the one closest to the end, I might, now a lot of people try to get closer to the end. Okay, so, it's, I'm not going to say that the person who went first wouldn't get the job because sometimes that works that way. But I'm just speaking about me and some people that have been in a room with me. Okay? Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm on the phone.
Yes.
I'm at CMS Central. Is it okay to take notes during the interview process as far as what the panel is saying about things that you may not already know?
Absolutely, but what you want to do is you want to do that in a judicious manner. You don't want to.
Okay.
You don't want to remove your ability to stay in contact with the people in the room. I have been in a room where people were taking copious notes, and that was disturbing to the point that it was disruptive to the interview process because their head was down most of the time. If you're jotting down something so that you can remember because it's a two-part question or something along that line, that's acceptable. But if you're just trying to write down every line item that we say so you can go back and study it, that's a problem.
Okay.
I have a question on the phone from central office. Do most CMS managers receive coaching on how to conduct an interview and also proper etiquette for getting back to interviewees after the interview?
You're asking that as a question.
Yes.
Okay. Um, uh, do they receive the training? I'm trying to think about the training list. Um, I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to play it safe. Okay? Uh, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm Nick Kowalski, I'm with Osora. In regards to thank you note, what would be a basic outline for those thank yous? I mean, for a thank you note, like, first line, thank you, da, 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 da. But then, is there kind of like just some comments that, you should address? Or, I mean, each one will be different, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but, kind of like just, some questions you should answer in a thank you note. Kind of like an outline that would make it
No,
basic.
no, because what happens is you don't want the note to be a note that you walk out of there having taken copious notes
Mhm.
and decide that, well, I didn't answer this well enough in the room, so I'm going to answer it now in a note. We don't normally look at that and accept that because once your interview is over, and that's one of the reasons why I talked about not being too lengthy in that, because people tend to want to try to answer questions that they felt that they gave partial answers to during the interview process.
Okay, so that's not a good thing.
No, ma'am. I wouldn't recommend it, I'd say, okay?
Okay, so a good thing in a thank you note would be addressing what?
Well, I just thank you for the opportunity to have interviewed, okay? And maybe some simple line after that.
Like, I think I'd be a good fit.
No, because they'll determine that, okay?
Okay, so
They'll
it's just,
determine. Mhm.
it's just a thank you for the interview
Just,
thing?
yeah, just a thank you for the interview.
And no substance, I mean,
I, you know, I'm just one person making that judgment, okay? I never looked upon it as being that much because there's not much you can tell me after the fact.
okay.
If you say thank you, that reminds me of who you were. And that's all I really need to know because I'm going to think about the substance that you gave me in the interview process. That's just Jim Cagle. Okay? Now, some others may do, if we had a bunch of HR people in here, they may say, well, but we would, but I'm just giving you just what Jim Cagle, from a hiring manager standpoint, have been exposed to doing, okay? Okay,
Okay, I have one other question, if it's
sure,
okay.
sure.
Okay. Um, I've kind of had people say when you're at an interview, just answer the questions you're asked, just like you do in a courtroom. Don't
Uh-huh.
bring up anything that they didn't bring up because it might either make or break your chances. So just answer the question they're asking. So where do you draw the line as far as how far into telling them what you need to tell them?
Okay. Um, is there ever a period where they ask you to tell me about yourself?
I'm sorry, say that again,
Is
please.
there ever a period of time that during the interview process that you are ever asked, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Oh, yes. Uh,
That's
that seems to be
that's where
the
you
first
do it.
question on the list.
That's where you do it. Okay,
Okay.
so what happens is when you go into that tell me a little bit about yourself process, the way Jim Cagle does it, I've already studied what I believe that the job application is asking for. So because I've studied that and I studied my background, I insert myself into conditions that allow me to speak about those elements. So I'm telling
Okay.
the story in a process-related manner of how I've done some of these things, realizing I'm just going to superficially touch most of them. And then when I see the writing process begin, I know that I've hit pay dirt. So now I'm going to just continue with the elevator speech that I have memorized, that I'm walking down that list of skills, knowledge, and abilities, describing myself in those roles. So now,
Okay.
when we begin the interview process, they're going to ask me the closed-end question. So if I'm asked a closed-end question, they're asking me something specific. And I don't need to do anything beyond answering that question to embellish upon that, because they've basically gotten the substance out of some of the other things that I told them up front. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There was a question over here, ma'am?
Yes, my name is Sheree Belton and I work for OHC. I'm a human resources specialist. And I just wanted to address the young lady that asked about coaching.
Yes.
There is a hiring management toolkit on the intranet that is accessible to all employees of CMS. So there are items in there that addresses interview and questions.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Charlene Mansoray from OIT. My question is in regards to follow-up and taking follow-up a step further after the thank you note when the job has actually been awarded to someone other than yourself. What is your opinion on follow-up, trying to figure out, what to improve on and getting other additional feedback from the hiring manager?
I like the way you phrase that, because what is your opinion on it? Because that's all this is just my opinion on it, okay? And you, if that's someone else up here presenting, they may have a different opinion, okay? As I mentioned at the beginning, when you are interviewing, you're building a skill. Okay, so you're building a skill that you're going to get better the more you do it. Okay, so when I leave an interview that I wasn't hired for, I'm just thinking that the person fit well. Okay, and there's probably not a gap that I had. It's just that I just wasn't a fit. Now, when you're looking for information in terms of, did I not have some technical information? Is it okay to ask that? If I was a technical person, I probably would. Because if it meant that, I needed to have this application experience and I didn't, then that would be helpful for me to know, because now I can go back and pay to get that and be better prepared to do that. Okay? If I'm in a soft skill area, I'm probably not going to ask that question. I'm just going to kind of look at it as, I could have done better. You know what I mean? And that's going to drive me to go back and do more homework for myself so that I can present myself better at the next opportunity that I have to provide an interview to someone. So again, if it's technical that you're looking for and you're okay with hearing something negative, I got to put that in there, because some people can't handle hearing the truth. Okay, so if you can handle hearing that, because sometimes what happens is, I've seen where people provide the information and the first thing that happened is the other person was countering. Well, you didn't get the job. You asked me the question, we told you what it was, you didn't get the job, and now you want to push back. Now, I'll say this. In certain areas, I don't know if it's this way in federal government, but I do have an HR person in the back that can help clarify this if it is. There'll be some people who may not want to do that because it might open them to having to justify it through a higher level. Okay? So it's easier to just say, look, you didn't get the interview. Thank you. You did well, blah, blah, blah. So you may not get an answer even if you did ask the question. Okay? So it's kind of helpful. Okay, you're welcome. Question? HR?
It varies.
Okay, good. Yes, ma'am.
Karen Orange. Like you, I have tendency to
Like me. Okay.
So I would like to have some suggestions.
Carry a book or something to take notes. Focus on planning or holding that in your hand. And then in your other hand, have a pen and look at it every now and then to make sure it's placed on the table. Okay? Because if you know what they're doing, it's likely you won't be using them. The question was, Karen speak with her hands like Jim Cagle does from time to time. And when I know that I need to just speak with my mouth, I put something in my hand so I can watch my hands under a certain level of control. I don't sit on them anymore. I just make sure that I control where they're at. Okay? Good question, man.
I have one question.
Sure.
Nice perspective. I was told years ago that when you go for interviews, actually, sorry, I'm Goke Taro from when you go for an interview, for guys, you have to wear either a plain white shirt or a blue shirt. Does that really matter? Because from what I was told years ago, that it eliminates distractions from the interviewee.
Well, anymore today, you want to think about, is it a conservative environment? If the environment is a conservative environment, then you don't want to come in with a party suit. You want to come in with something that's just kind of, trendy today. Like, for instance, I wear a blue suit from time to time, but I may have a checked shirt under it. Okay? If I were going on an interview and I was going to a place that I believe to be a conservative place, I would probably just wear a solid color shirt. Now, I like the way that blue shirt looks up under that. That's a today's man thing, or I'm sorry, a Men's Warehouse thing. I could stand up on that poster and be a model on that one, okay? But that may not be the appropriate attire for that particular setting. If it was a firm, a law firm, it might be. But that's why it's helpful to understand the culture that you work in. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I have another question on the.
Sure. I'm listening.
Oh, was someone else about to ask a question?
Oh, go ahead with your question, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for suggesting the Toastmasters. I agree. I think that's a wonderful program for many people. Along those same lines, I was curious if CMS has ever considered, or maybe has done it before, offered mock interview training for interviewees, sort of like a Toastmasters, but more like an actual, mock interview sessions with experienced managers who could sort of in a safe environment pepper you with questions, and rather than using the informational interview process, because I know a lot of employees might be interested in a specific area but don't want to blow it with an informational interview if they really want to work in that area.
That's a good suggestion. Now, I know of mock interviews that have gone on, but I don't know if it was directed by the leadership to do that. Okay, I work in an organizational development setting, so from time to time we get calls, and where we have a small group of people who want that, we accommodate that kind of thing. Okay, or we've assisted people who wanted to have the pressure of being under an interview condition, and have done that. But I can't say that I know of anything in the agency where we've done that, and I want to draw on my HR representative in the room.
I've only been here for a year, and I haven't heard of anything. In previous agencies, either an employee
on the telephone,
this, or a component may, set something like that.
we can hear.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
We have a question in the room first before we go to the telephone.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Williams with Office of Communications. My question is for the phone interviews. How do you let your character and your light shine through on the phone, not in the person's or the panel's, face? So it's a little more difficult.
I tell you what, though, phone interviews are successful because I know a few people who have been hired based upon phone interviews. So what I'll say about the telephone interview is that there's that level of enthusiasm that's in your voice. Okay? They're asking questions in a manner that I believe that they can discern a lot out of when that's taking place. Clearly, they've reviewed your information thoroughly, So that's probably one of the reasons why they've agreed to have a telephone interview in the first place. Okay, but that's purely on, like you said, your voice and whatever you have going on in that. So that enthusiasm, everything seems to be there. Remember, I said many people can pull that off. They know how to have a conversation about employment opportunities, and they do well, whether or not it's in person or on a telephone interview. Now, my preference is I want to be face to face because I want to be reading the facial expressions in the room. I want to be able to govern myself based upon what I'm seeing. Okay, that helpful, man?
I can attest to phone interviews because I was very nervous when I had to do that. I was living on the West Coast, interviewing for a job on the East Coast. First time I had heard of it, and I was very nervous, but I just mentally prepared myself and pretended the person was sitting in front of me, and it all went well, and it was my first federal job.
Outstanding. Well, for those of you who are on the phone, we're about to lose you in about now.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we can
Thank
continue.
you very much.
You're very welcome. We can continue to talk until you find that you can't
Thank
hear us
you.
any longer. So I'll take questions as long as you need them.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Are there any other questions in the room? Okay. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Great job. Great job.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Okay.
Do a good job.
Oh, thank you. See you.
Thank you for coming. Good. How are you?